Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Weekly Thing, where my name is, of course, Ettiene, joined by my good friend and co-host, Merlin. Merlin, I have an interesting two-part question for you concerning where we are in the entertainment industry at the moment. So, I don't know how you feel about this, but do you think adding more lore to an existing IP is always the right thing to do? So here's the example that I'm using from. So you know the 1984 Terminator movie, the original one. Basic plot, Terminator gets sent back in time to kill Sarah Connor. She's about to give birth to who will eventually lead humanity to victory against the machines. Everybody knows this. But now, in the Dark Horse comic book in Terminator, they've said that another Terminator was sent back in 1984 to kill a lady cop who will eventually give birth to another lady cop who will help John Connor with one operation that will save humanity in the future. So my question is two-part. One, would this be considered a retcon, or is it just adding lore? And two, do you think adding lore to an existing IP like this tarnishes what it originally was?
Hi, Ettiene, how are you doing?
I came out of this one really hot. I read the article and I was like, no, I don't know. I need to know.
Okay, no problem, no problem. So your first question is about retconning, and the second question is, there's a lot to unpack here already, my friend. And you say it's in a comic book. This is a comic book has now fucked with the law.
Yes, so it's obviously it's very new, this comic book. This has been going on forever. Dark Horse comics based in the Terminator world. But yeah, I guess my actual question is this. If you base your lore on time travel, specifically the Terminator one, you can do whatever you want. But do you think continuously adding lore to that original story, does that tarnish what that original story is? Because you can say anything when it comes to time travelers specifically, which is why I think doing it in the Terminatorverse is so risky, because you can essentially keep doing this forever. You can just say, yeah, that happened, but this also happened, and this also happened.
Yeah, you could definitely go that route. I'd rather prefer the route that previous incarnations of a Terminator and John Connor and whatever have impact on the story, so the timeline keeps shifting and jumping away from them. That I'm fine with. If you kind of move it along as we go, because the future in Terminator is always in the future. So if you get to the dates, like if we're in Terminator times, I don't think we are, right? But if we were, if we're getting close to it, you have to push it back. Although these days you don't have to push it back that far. It's time travel. You said it. It's a risk in the Terminator universe, but it's a risk in every story. Having time travel, having characters go back, fix their problems through that. I can point to a bunch of examples where it does not belong. Terminator, on the other hand, it is central to the plot. It's what it's about. The Terminator gets sent back in time to kill John Connor, and they can theoretically, if they delay the future, they can keep sending back Terminators to kill the people who lead the revolution. It doesn't even need to be John Connor anymore. You could have changed that future really. John Connor is safe and he lives a long life, and then when he's old and decrepit, the robots rise up then, and then it's someone else that has. There's a lot of ways you can go.
That would be
time travel.
That is actually, that would make quite a Terminator movie. Imagine that the machines just figure we could just wait them out. We can just postpone D-Day a little bit. So I take it you're not a big Terminator fan, because they did actually do that. They changed a lot of the Terminator, especially in the last two movies. John Connor is almost in the second last one. He's the villain, so he goes from being the good guy to being the villain. And in the last one, he's completely written out of continuity in any way. Because what you say is absolutely correct, and that is the route that they went with. They went with because it's time travel. If we keep changing the future, it can be anything. So maybe Terminator can be forgiven for this. But how do you feel say, for instance, a Star Wars? Because it's coming. They did time travel in Star Wars in the animated shows, which is technically canon. And they're definitely going to introduce that, because it's Ashoka that does the time traveling. So if she gets introduced in her own show, we're going to get some live action Star Wars time travel. You feel as good about that as you do about the Terminator time travel?
If time travel is not central to your plot, don't use it. Okay.
Don't fucking use it.
Yeah. If you're gonna use it, it needs to be near central to your plot. It can't be incidental because the implications are always so far-reaching. You can't do it. Like, I can't stop anyone from doing anything. You can put time travel in your story, but at least proceed with caution, right? Because I have a lot more examples in my hand of where it didn't work than where it did.
Can you give me one?
Where it didn't work, I don't like it at all. I also find the time travel, the time turner in The Prisoner of Azkaban very alarming.
It's very problematic.
Oh, it makes my brain so much.
In Harry Potter specifically, that's a very good example. The time travel there is quite a problem. We'll get to that in a second because I actually like to talk about that. You didn't like Endgame. That is quite a thing to say in this year of our Lord 2023. You might get banned at the stake there, Will.
No, like Endgame was a lot of fun also in its own way. And there's a lot of clip show elements to it, like, remember like the MCU, all that stuff. And entirely within the realms of comic books to get, that's perfectly fine stuff to happen in comic books. And so that's in line with that. And especially because Endgame wasn't the finale, actually, they had to carry it on. And this is how like this goes. The story has gotten so muddy that your finale is time travel, and that your finale isn't even your finale. That's like in the middle somewhere. So somewhere in the middle, they rewrote the timeline. It's also where I guess, my gripe with Harry Potter and the time turners in it is you could do all that stuff that day, but didn't you have this on the days where horrible stuff actually happened? Couldn't you use an extra day there? That's my problem with that. But I wouldn't, it's written, that's a story, that's what it is. And it now serves as an example of, if you want to make this world feel grounded, having time travel in the mix threatens that, or like moves away from it. Not impossible, but tricky. If time travel is
difficult.
Yeah,
I agree.
Yeah. If time travel is at the center of your story, on the other hand, you can basically use magic for it.
That's also true. If you think you're Back to the Futures, your time traveler's wife, you're that kind of the one with Simon Pegg, it works just fine. I actually have to agree with you on Endgame. It feels almost, I know they went to a lot great lengths to explain it. It's not really time travel, it's multiverse jumping or whatever. But it's time travel. Ultimately, it is time travel. We're going back in time to different points, and then we're looking at it, and then we're taking things, and then we're coming back to our own timelines. It's very much time travel. And it does leave an almost sour taste in your mouth because it doesn't feel like a proper conclusion. It never does, especially if it's used to solve plot problems. For me, it's always like, ooh, yes, you couldn't think a way out of this problem that you created, could you, Mr. Writer Man?
Mr. Writer Man. And for Endgame, it's particularly weird because they begin with a time jump and then they go into time travel.
That's actually very true.
I can't, once again, can't change it. That's what it is now. That is the story they told, and that's what we have, and there's no fixing it or whatever. And if you want to build a story on top of that, you're going to have to, once again, like, fiddle with bits that was established before to bring it back to retconning stuff. All of a sudden we find out the Infinity Stones aren't that important to anyone. Thanos was just a fool, and that for 10 years you cared about garbage.
I know what you're saying. It did, because the Loki show did that. As soon as you see that, it's like, what? But you said something else.
Yeah, and that's the threat with retconning stuff like this, is that you now retroactively change what things mean and how people should have felt. And sometimes it works because you reveal a plot point that does the same. Let's go back to Harry Potter. What we learn about Snape by the end changes how we feel about Snape. But in the first 3 books, he is cartoonish in his bad teacher villainy kind of role that he was given.
He's almost a character.
Yeah. But you can also kind of, as you're reading and you know the twist, you can see she knew too. While she was writing it, she knew this secret about him, and it bleeds through without her having to tell you. I can't say that definitely, I guess, but maybe my brain is putting it in. Kudos, well, that's
you're giving credit where credit isn't due, but it probably is though. I've read Prisoner of Azkaban, and you're not surprised by the end. Sometimes when you're presented with a twist, you go, but this came out of nowhere. The Snape twist doesn't come out of nowhere, or at least it doesn't feel like that. I agree with you. Maybe Terminator isn't the best example. I shouldn't be as mad. It's just, I just want people to stop rehashing, get a new IP, or if your lore is extensive as a Terminator universe, because again, it's the entire planet afflicted by this, you can just change it. You can have Terminators in Africa. You can have Terminators in Vietnam and what happened there that time. Or you can start doing some of the future stuff, because they have given us some of the future war stuff. We had a standalone Terminator Salvation movie that no one loved or watched even. But that also, I think, Terminator is mostly about, it's the time travel is used as a catalyst. It's not the plot point. Although it is central to the plot, it's almost like, it's just a thing that they use to kick off the action with. And that's fine.
That's the other thing. They send a person, and that person has to deal with whatever time he lands it. And I think keeping it simple like that would have been the best way. But we're beyond that point.
Yes, very far beyond that point. Everything has to be interconnected nowadays.
Yeah, I'm a big Terminator 1 and 2 fan. Beyond that, I might have seen... There's a third one, right? I might have seen the third one.
There's a third one.
I saw the Chronicles of Sarah Connor. Is that a thing?
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, a TV show.
Yeah.
So you know
I watched that a bit, but I couldn't tell you what happens in it. While the Arnold Schwarzenegger Terminator movies from back in the day when CGI was terrible is great.
Terminator 2 specifically is a god tier film, but it follows the rules of cinema. It shows, it doesn't tell, and it mixes in emotional relativity, because everyone understands a teenage boy and teenage angst, and he doesn't have a dad, and then this thing shows up. So everyone understands that, and they use that relationship between the boy and Terminator, and then everything around it is just cool, because you also have Arnie walking around with a minigun. The chase scene on the Harley is dope, even by today's standard. But of course, anytime a guy's shooting a shotgun one-handed, I'm on board. Always.
All the memes, man. All the memes.
The memes alone.
So memeable.
I knew talking to you about this would ease my mind. Maybe I should go. Maybe I should just read the comic first before I lay so much judgment out on it. It's just because we're halfway through The Mandalorian season 3 now, and it's struggling. It's struggling because it's doing this as well. It doesn't have time travel, but it's trying to incorporate all these things that you already know, and it kind of just washes over you. I don't know if you've been keeping up with The Mandalorian, but because you feel the fatigue, right?
Yeah, no, oh shame, man. No shame. I haven't. No one has talked to me about it that much, which is already not a good sign. But also, there's no one has come to me and be, you have to watch this, or this is great, or whatever. So I haven't gotten any word of mouth review about it in my little hermit circle. And you're the one that makes me watch more, trendy and contemporary stuff. So if you're not going to make me watch it, I'm definitely not going to watch.
No, I don't think I will, Fred, not this time. Maybe we're all feeling it because, yes, superhero movies in general and the culture is really struggling. Ant-Man, abysmal box office return. Shazam 2 is doing even worse. Shazam 2 actually was outperformed by John Wick 4, which is, don't quote me on this, but it's definitely been a long time since an action movie outgrossed a superhero movie. And because they traditionally don't make a lot of money, action movies are quite niche. They make money, they're reliable because they're pretty cost effective. You can make, even the John Wick movies aren't that expensive. The first one was shot for something like 40 million, which is, compared to your 100 million budgets of your MCUs and DC movies, it's change.
Because you... Okay.
Yeah, because it's mostly because it's practical effects that they have already figured out. Like, no one in Hollywood struggles to do gunshots. I mean, you have kids going to film school making short videos with like pretty believable action sequences. And then it's just mostly getting the talent. You need choreographers and fight scene coordinators, and then an action director that knows action movies. And that's about all you really need. You don't need legions of special effects guys, or you maybe need a car guy, you maybe need a weapons guy, and you need a martial arts guy. And that's about it. And then you just need an actor on board that is as passionate as Keanu Reeves. And then Bob's your uncle. So that's definitely a factor, but still, in gross box office returns, it's outperforming the heavy hitters. Because I thought because Shazam was a relatively good received DCU movie, one of the few. I thought Shazam 2 would come out swinging, and it's really not. It's really not doing well. So I think we are, maybe as a culture, over this. I also think post Everything Everywhere All at Once, it'll be very difficult to convince the average going movie public to go watch something that isn't, because that movie is like a back to roots movie. It's a movie-ass movie. It tells a very...
it's a movie-ass
movie. Yeah, facts. And it's not part of a bigger thing. You don't have to have seen 10 years or whatever. You could just watch it on its own. And I think, like you mentioned, with the muddiness of where we are with fucking time travel and space lasers and all these things, it's like average person that isn't a fan of these things, because Marvel or comic book movies were, I think, for the masses, is definitely, you get your money's worth out of those. You get to see some good things. There will be a few jokes. You'll feel good at the end because the good guys will win, and you'll see a hunk take off his shirt at some stage. And that's the quadrant, man. That's the movie going quadrant. That's old, young, male, female. That's all the viewers right there. But now, no one's taking off their shirts and everyone's talking about space lasers. No one cares.
Okay, that's interesting. I drifted off of there in the middle, thinking about my own experience with the MCU through the years and how on board I was for it, and how elated I was with Infinity War, and how disappointed I was with Endgame. The DC universe really didn't get off the ground for me. Really.
No, Joe, I think everyone feels the same. There are things that you like here and there, but mostly it's a staggering start. It's like a dog that just won't run.
Yeah. And I do think I will enjoy the return to smaller stories. I would enjoy that. Can you imagine a story that's not an interconnected universe? Madman.
Dare I dream such wild dreams? But yeah, maybe we'll see, because John Wick also does prove like it takes a while to get there, because it was 3 movies before the 4th one. And we're really going to get into all of it in a second. But so there is that as well. And I think if a MCU movie comes out and it doesn't make an immediate $1 billion, they're almost scrapping the whole thing, because that's what happened with the DC movies. They weren't making $1 billion each. So they just, and the flimsiness of it, because, I don't know, getting the public to trust you. James Gunn is a very good candidate, I feel, to get this done, because he has a lot of public favor, I feel. The movies that he's put out in recent years all were received critically and commercially very well. The Suicide Squad, everyone loved that. Guardians of the Galaxy, we're all fans. So I think he's definitely enough to make people go, we'll go see the first James Gunn outing. But that's also a lot of pressure. And I don't think it's going to go his way entirely, and I don't think it'll be his fault either. Because 10 years down the line, starting over is hectic, man. That's a lot. It's a lot to ask.
Yeah, it would be better to wait 5 years, go quiet, and then come back, because the bitter taste is still in our mouths. Oh no!
And we're all still reeling from the 4-hour Snyder cut. Which
But let's gamble on game. on Gen Gun, right? He does seem to give us a lot more than the rest do. So
That's true. He does seem like a fan first and foremost, also, and that's very cool. But yeah, let's talk some John Wick. That's why we're here. It's John Wick Palooza still very much. So John Wick 4, it came, it went, we saw it. It was long. It was definitely long.
tell me about it, man. I haven't seen it yet. I downloaded. Yes.
Whoa! Can't say that out loud.
And the it's still as bad as it. I look at it, I'm like, is this 2005? Didn't this get any better? It's the first one I've seen in years, and it's such terrible quality. I was just like, no, I can't.
I also can't watch movies like that, man. So weird. With that true HD, I don't know, man. Maybe it wasn't. Look, supporting the John Wick movie, I have no problem with that. But ultimately, if you didn't see this in the cinema, I don't think you would have had a better time seeing it in the cinema than in the comfort of your own house, waiting for the DVD on this one. Maybe not the worst call. They do some things in John Wick 4 that I really don't like. They introduce yet another faction of the table, which comes out of nowhere, which is a bit bullshit. And the one thing about the John Wick movies, all of them that I've never, like the first one can be forgiven for this because it's your introduction and it's for the titular character, but there's no opposition. Like, why is the table conducting all of its business in secret, and it has coins and it has all these rules? You would imagine those rules exist to keep the entire organization intact and safe and whatever. And if you disobey the rules, what you're essentially doing is causing a vulnerability in the organization, or at least that's what I thought it was all about. But there's no opposition. There's no like dedicated super cop task force or a dedicated agency, or there's no FBI presence. You see what I mean? It's just by the fourth one, it's a little bit like, yes, why are you guys even doing this in secret? You can just literally take over the world. They also seem to have a near inexhaustible amount of money. So again, why the secrecy? I don't know. Do you think it's a problem in John Wick not having any cop presence or like an opposition force?
Okay. Definitely in the first two, they got by because they did move secretly. They did have like, it was quieter, you could almost say, except for that one crazy mall scene. But for the rest of it, it was generally quiet. They worked in the shadows, and they worked in places where there were only criminals, or assassins, or whatever we're talking about here. By the third one, I don't know how do you not get on the news by the third one?
No, at least a little bit. Like, not even, they didn't even introduce like we have a PR guy that spins this shit for us. Like, he goes, makes the round at other news agencies or whatever. And that would have been a great opportunity actually to introduce a comic relief character. Just this utter slimeball marketing.
Like the lawyer in the first one, right? Like Viggo's lawyer and John Wick 1.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Just a spineless leech of a man. It's just, exactly. So I did feel that a bit. Also, the table, and so the thing that they introduced, if you don't mind spoiling it, spoiler, for everyone listening as well. Do you mind if I spoil it a bit for you?
No, I don't care about spoiler.
Sweet. So they introduce Skarsgård's character in John Wick 4 is introduced as the Marquis de Gramo or something like that. So he's essentially a separate from the adjudicators. He's also an auditor, essentially. So the movie starts off with him going to Winston in New York, and he's like, listen, okay, so actually the first shot of the movie is John Wick going to get his ring back from the elder, and then there's a new elder, and this elder tells him, your ring was melted down along with all the possessions of the previous elder. And then John Wick just shoots him in the head. And then this kicks off the Marquis's power. So he has like a blank check almost. He can do whatever to get. So they upped the bounty for John Wick. It ends on like 30 million or something, which is a far cry from the 2 million he got in the first movie. And that's basically the whole plot. So it's just John finding the table, and he has no friends left, and everywhere he goes, this Marquis and these guys show up, and they do the thing, and they have their action sequences. But But I feel like, don't we already have this function? Judicators, for instance, like now they shot a peg down. I don't think that you can keep adding elements like this just forever. It felt a bit cheap. Does it feel cheap to you?
I wouldn't know because I haven't seen it. I got lost there for a bit. So that the old Elder of the High Table has been replaced by someone else.
Mm-hmm.
And that guy is killed by John Wick.
Yeah, and that guy's killed by John Wick because he didn't.
And then the Marquis comes in and is like, well, maybe I'm the new Elder.
Yeah, sorta. He's like they do introduce it like the Marquis has always existed, but they don't do much. They only get called in when shit gets like really bad. His henchmen are pretty cool as well, though. They all wear this grey suit, and they're just fearless, and they're like stone cold killers, and that's pretty cool. But John Wick 4 also, the action sequences are off the chain, and John Wick gets hurt so it's cartoonish at a stage. At one point he jumps out a third floor window and then cracks his pelvis on a bus, and then he just gets up and walks away. So I honestly, it does feel like they leaned into it. And they also introduced more characters, John Wick-esque. So there's a guy called Mr. Nobody who has a dog, and then the blind guy, Donnie Yen. And they're like the same, I want to say power level almost to John Wick.
Oh, I saw in the trailers the one guy katanas bullets. So power level is the word we
Yes, that's definitely where we are. Because it is an anime now. The fourth one might just be an anime. Yeah, he's also blind, so that's always cool. I love me a blind swordsman. I think everyone does.
Yeah, there is something real cool about that.
Oh, well, that's about it. So yeah, and then it's just John Wick maneuvering and killing his way to the Marquis, and then he eventually kills him as well. And then everyone's set free, and it's a happy ending. And then something else happens, and then it's gone, and then it's over. But that's about it. But yeah, the main thing about John Wick 4 is it definitely reinforces the idea that the people that participate in this organization are generally people that cannot let things go, because they're all driven by revenge.
Oh yeah. And in this and John Wick 4, is there something that stands out to you in that vein with somebody?
Yeah, very clearly. So one of the first action sequences is John Wick goes to the Japanese Continental in Osaka, and he has like a friend there, and they chill for a bit, and then these Marquis high table guys show up, and they fight them together, and then this guy gets killed by Donnie Yen, and his daughter is there as well. So she's the concierge, the same way Karen is to Winston, but she's hurt.
Okay.
But she's also a fighter. She does a lot of bow and arrow things, and she also kills a lot of people prior to this. But then she picks up the sword to go after Donnie Yen, and he says, "Don't, live rather." And then she starts struggling away, and then he says, "I'll be waiting for you." And that is also the end credit scene. So if you wait past all the credits, it's Donnie Yen going to his daughter, because that's the deal he made, blah, 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 backstory things. And then she's there, and it looks like she's going to fight him in the streets and kill him. So it's definitely, all of them are driven by revenge. That's the most standouty thing. But then it's also like throwaway lines. Like Winston at one stage tells John Wick, "Do what you do best." And then John is like, "What is that?" And he says, "Revenge." And then that's it. So there's a lot of that. There is one problem with this theory of ours, though, or maybe not a problem, we'll discuss it, is in John Wick 2, the opening sequence. That guy, the guy that tells the story again about John Wick as he's driving the car, he does let it go. But it could also be because, like, John makes it all the way to his office, and then he's like, "You call it quits now, I won't kill you." So it could be that, like, he does let it go because he was given his life, almost.
Yeah. Okay. I see what you mean there. And he, disappears out of the story, because that is that's kind of what it means to let it go in this organization, is to get out, like John Wick did, to be out of this world or whatever. Maybe that criminal guy went back criminaling. We will never know. unless he comes back. I don't know. That is interesting. That is actually interesting that there is examples of it. I suspect that there was some people that could let it go, but obviously our the main drivers of the stories, are not people who can let things go. John Wick included. Actually, I thought about it. Vigo, chased after John in the first one after Joseph was killed. But, so Vigo couldn't let it go, even though John Wick considered himself done. But at the end of the second one, it is John Wick who is given the opportunity to walk away, and he does it, which leads to Parabellum and where we are now. So even John Wick can't really let it go. If he did, could have let it go,
That's true. It literally starts. You called it in when we talked about John Wick 1. This entire thing gets kicked off because the guy who wants to buy his car can't accept that he doesn't want to sell his car to him. He just can't let that go. And then they break into his house and John Wick happens. The Vigo thing is also interesting because from the moment Vigo decides to go after John Wick, after his son gets killed, he does it with almost lackluster approach. He's not very serious about it. He gets drunk. He asks for his cigarettes, missed fights. He casually hands his concierge or whatever that guy is a gun, and he's like, yeah, good luck. It's almost like he knows he won't make it, but feels compelled to fight anyway. Because you can also assume, like, in this world of extreme violence and backstabbiness and power complexes, because they all have that, we see that clearly in number 2 with the lady that commits suicide. She would rather commit suicide than be a victim of, this life that she is very much a part of. Like Vigo, like it is also conceivable that if you're known as the mob boss that back down to someone else, that you'll just get murdered in your sleep anyway.
Yeah, live by the sword, die by the sword.
Definitely feels like that at times as well. But yeah, John Wick also just, can't let things go. He had no reason to shoot that guy at the end of number 2 in the Continental. He could have waited. At some point, he would have gotten him.
Indeed, he would. But he chose, and, it is where he is now. Is he given a chance to get out in the new one?
So no, ultimate spoilers, he does die at the end. There's a grave. Yeah, he does die.
I thought we were getting your 5th one. This is the last one.
No, it's not. That's the weak sauce part about it. So they've already confirmed that John Wick 4 and 5 are being shot back to back, which makes the ending of 4 a bit like, don't say these things beforehand, man. Like, wait 6 months until everyone has had a chance to see it, and then be like, don't worry, guys, there will be more John Wick. But
okay. Yeah, well, let's move into more known territory. The first 3, less spoilers. If we have to say spoilers for the first 3, get your shit together for John Wick.
That's very true. Those movies are old. You should have seen them by now. The first 3, I don't know. You have a huge problem with Parabellum, if I remember correctly. What exactly? What bothers you about that movie?
I can't really properly pin it. Okay. There's another sequence that's similar, and it's in Last Jedi. It's the casino sequence. I can't tell you what's wrong with it because I keep falling asleep. Okay. That is the review. And it's in John Wick, it's at different times and at different parts, but there's a stretch there that it is just non-stop action, and my brain can't discern one scene from the next, and it's just like, whoa. And yeah, there's nothing artistic in that segment where it's just action and just fighting, and it's different people fighting him, and different scenarios and all that like stuff. There's never like in the first 2 where there's these set pieces that I'm like, oh my word, that's flippin' amazing. Like, look how they did that. Going back and rewatching it and stuff like that. Nothing in John Wick 3 that gets me like that. I don't even have a for the first one I love Think, and for the second one I love It's called Le Castlevania. It's two pieces of music in these two movies, and they're like the entire sequence with the music and everything. I love both of them so much, but there's nothing in the third one that stands out like that to me. I don't know if there's anything like that for you.
I think let me try and explain what I think you're feeling with how I felt about Parabellum, because Parabellum is obviously it's pedal to the metal from the get go. Like it starts off hectic and it just never stops. And I do agree with you that they never stopped to consider like it feels like they focused more on the action and what weapons and things will be used, like a tighter choreography instead of where it takes place or how it looks while it does it. Because there are some fun things in Parabellum. The horse stuff is lots of fun. I mean, killing a guy with a horse that's pretty inventive. And
Yeah, good.
when we get to see him fighting with a pencil, what I do like about number 3 is the table guards that they send to the Continental and how armored they are, and the fact that it's this challenge for John Wick where he has, so you can't kill them, but he uses his bullets to like knock them out to get close. I thought all of that was pretty inventive, but it does kind of wash over you at that point because it's a lot. The fight sequence with Halle Berry, especially, it just never ends. It just goes on and on and on.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I keep forgetting that's also in that movie. I don't know what it is about Parabellum, but it just feels like a bunch of movies to me, like stitched together.
Because it is a
And
lot. There's a lot of things that happen.
yeah, and it's not even that I actually like particularly dislike anything they did. They have a lot of cool moves. They have a lot of cool characters. There's interesting stuff happening. The adjudicator is flippin' great as a surreal, weird character in this world. Like, she's a criminal judge. What is happening? Yeah, and that's
Yeah,
pretty
it's
fun. Yeah, and they do some twists and turns and whatever. So it's not that even that it's all bad. I give it a pass and I will rewatch it. There's some stuff that happens in there is real cool. But if I have to choose, I would rather watch the first two. I've obviously rewatched the first one thousands, not really thousands, but more than one should. I think maybe because we were waiting for the second one, we didn't have anything else back then.
There is nothing like John Wick though. There's like even watching John Wick 4, you are constantly reminded that there aren't action movies like this. Like John Wick is great and all, don't get me wrong, but my favorite action movie is Extraction with Chris Hemsworth, because Extraction does what John Wick 1 and 2 does, is the action sequences in that movie is a direct result of the plot points. Like everything that happens in John Wick 1 and John Wick 2 is a direct result of the plot. When Parabellum, there's a very deafening divide, because by what is he motivated in Parabellum, except for being excommunicado, but he did that to himself. So it's almost like, yes, we're following a guy here who we don't really, his motivations aren't sound.
Yeah, and I hear you there because up until this point, his motivations have been real sound. In the first one, he is so locked on Yosef. It is terrifying. He really gets the Baba Yaga feel down in the first one. You really feel intimidated.
He's hunted in the night.
Yeah, fucking crazy. And then the second one, he is given a first quest and then an enemy to defeat clearly, and that gets him into the trouble also. By the third one, where he is running, and that is how it feels. It does feel like he's running for the most part, um, for his life. But yeah, man, I don't know. The third one, it feels as if the third one is lamenting the fact that it had to exist.
Yeah, I completely. Yeah, when you said it, I was like, yeah, man, that's Lila.
It's still what you said just now. There's nothing like it. There's nothing like John Wick, and that counts for Parabellum as well. It's still, it's tactful, it's well executed choreography. There is some drama to it. It is still very stylish. That's still there, and
Sorry if it seems like a sudden drop off in tone there. We had some slight technical difficulties with the recording, but we're back to finish off the John Wick Palooza. So in summary, Merlin, what would you say? John Wick still the best action movie around?
I feel like that. It's definitely the one I've watched the most.
Yes.
Rewatched the most.
Yeah, me too as well. It's very rewatchable. It just is. They are the best. But in summary, so what do we say? The main plot's point driven, all these John Wick characters, the fact that they can't let anything go. And they're all driven by revenge.
Yeah, and what I wanted to add to the action segment we just talked about is John Wick might be the most action movie I've seen, just because of all the attention to detail they put into the action. You know, how beautiful the action is presented. It's kind of for its own sake as much as it's a tool to move the plot along. And that's pretty cool.
I do agree with you, definitely. I like it, like I said, with Extraction, and John Wick definitely has it as well. They try and do, it's not only set pieces, but it's different weapons, different tactics, it's different scenarios. There's different obstacles in the action sequences, and all of that really does set it apart. Because you have your plot, your overarching plot, but the action itself is almost its own entity. It's definitely handled separate. You can almost, because in most action movies, the action is just, it's not as plot derivative as it is in a John Wick. It's almost separate. Like, you'll already be a soldier on a mission, and then you'll just get action sequences in between to kind of fill out the space. But in John Wick, it's very much the everything in between is filling up the space, so we can focus on the action, which is great. Which is what makes it so rewatchable, maybe.
I think everything contributes to making it rewatchable, because yes, there is like filler spaces in between, but I don't ever feel like the proper filler spaces. Like, the drama in John Wick is also important. We talk about this a few times, that this is an opera, you know, and the talking bits are important, and how the characters interact with each other is still very interesting. I would, point to that. That's real good as well. But the action is also, as I said, it is for the art of the action. There's no guy that runs in and just shoots everybody up, you know, pa, 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 and then it's over. They take their time with each interaction and each exchange and each shot, you know, of a gun, or if a fist that flies, or whatever. And that is really, really cool. And that's why I would say, you know, it's one of the only proper action films, I guess. Rewatchability, it's beautiful, man. It is. The first two especially are balanced really well. It's so easy to get through those movies.
Yeah, that's true.
As they switch between beautiful action and operatic drama, and, you know, going back and forth between these spaces. And every time an action sequence comes up in the first two, it's kind of something you haven't seen before. You know, they went out of their way to be like real unique. And even if like the action itself was something you've seen before, the set pieces that they add to it, the music and the characters that they're fighting against, and what it means within the story, and everything contributes to a very unique experience that you can't find really anywhere else that much. I'm pointing now to Nobody that we spoke about last week, and it does have some of the Wiccan themes, as we've discussed, but because they're doing something entirely different by the end, that just devolves into a normal, in air quotes, action, you know.
It does by the end evolve. I was just about to say that I completely agree with you. It's like you can feel the replication in things that try to rip off John Wick, like Nobody, especially Nobody. But that it doesn't. It feels very organic in John Wick itself. Like, everything feels very, very weird. Like Nobody, you can see, okay, this is what they were going for. They're definitely duplicating some things here, or they're using a trope here or whatever. But in John Wick, it all feels very organic. It really is one of its kind. The movie. If I had to be that guy, and I had to lay a slight critique against the action sequences, sometimes, especially if you watch them enough times, you can see where actors and stunt actors, and especially Keanu Reeves, wait for cues, especially in all the jiu-jitsu sequences. You can because there are gaps that won't be there
Yeah.
in a normal like fight to the death. It would be much more frantic, I think, in real life. But that's not like I'm not saying it subtracts anything. I'm just saying like if I had to lay one critique, it would be that at some points you can see the actors waiting for the cues, especially if there's a jump kick or whatever. But it doesn't subtract anything for me.
And I guess that's just the problem with action on screen, right? Action on film. If you make it like actual action and it's like a boxing match or a MMA fight or whatever, it can become unreadable, because it isn't for the readability, it's for winning the fight. And then what is beautiful and what is enjoyable for your audience isn't it as important as I'm gonna hit this guy a lot. So I hear you, and you do. Sometimes it does feel like John Wick is a little bit slow.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that might also just be because Keanu Reeves isn't a spring chicken anymore.
Yeah. And please go ahead.
No, that. Yeah, no, I lost my thing there, but I was just gonna talk shit anyway, so it doesn't.
But it's true that he's not. It's still very impressive. Don't get me wrong. I still think it's very impressive. He is in his 50s and he does it very well. And because it's all genuine and there's no CGI, you don't feel like an overlap. Everything feels present and in the shot and real. And that makes it when someone gets shot in the head so much more visceral. So it doesn't subtract anything. Just again, if I had to, don't come at me. Or do come at me. I'll fight you.
Yeah, come fight us in our. Haha.
But I think that's it. I think next week we can do maybe what we'll do a proper look at John Wick 2 because that is our favorite and we haven't talked about that movie nearly enough. And I would like an excuse to just walk that one through one more time because John Wick 2 is definitely the best one. I think it expands the world in great ways. The action sequences. My favorite action sequence is from John Wick 2, and I also agree that this is the most unique one they have. Is the shootout that him and Caspian have in the train station where they're just walking and they're trying to hit each other. That is so scary to me, man.
Is it the sequence, the Reflections fight also very cool, and the Castlevania fight. Man.
Yeah.
I would definitely do a deep dive into John Wick 2. Just John Wick 2.
Just John Wick 2. John Wick 2 also has the coolest characters, and they have their cool characters being the coolest, because Karen is a badass. I know a bit more number 3 than number 2, but you just get more of him, and that's cool. I love me a silent type character that everyone relies on, I always think, because they exude strength and whatnot, and they like stability. Winston is cool, but the guy I think that gets the most underrated John Wick character is the weapons handler, the guy who sells him the weapons in the hotel.
Oh, yeah.
That guy is... I love that guy.
That entire sequence.
You're just great.
He's choosing a wine or whatever. Flippin' great.
Lovely. You're delightful. It's so I like it when they take like serious because it's very violent and these are bad people, but they're being camp and fun about it, and it's fun. It's really cool. Yeah, man, love me some John Wick. Now that we're almost sort of done with John Wick, are you still reading the Harry Potters?
I'm almost finished with Prisoner of Azkaban, and so that's where I took a week break after Hamlet. Not reading anything fiction, just non-fiction in that week, to kind of palate cleanse myself. I do not like it. I don't like it.
Hamlet, you mean?
I got to the end and I'm like, no, this is unsatisfactory. I don't understand why this has been popular for hundreds of years, man. I think Shakespeare, especially if you read it today, it's almost like, I bet you've seen this, and we have. I think that's why it matters, because Shakespeare is kind of the foundation for all modern fiction. All modern stories sort of follow that same approach. There's an introduction, a catalyst, ramp up, conflicts,
resolution, and then conclusion, and all of them.
And the English-speaking world, he has a lot of influence. There's actually a very interesting Korean plot structure that does not follow the three-act structure because it turns out you don't need it. It's just a way to solve the problem, not the way to solve the problem. But we'll talk about that at some other time. But take the time to explain.
Yeah,
it takes. Yeah,
I would love actually.
Say again?
I would love that actually. I didn't know this. Like it makes sense that there would be different formats to making movies, but a Korean way, that would be interesting. What do they have instead of the 3-act structure? Without going too much into it, like.
Okay, so it's more or less a 4-point or 4 beats that you're trying to hit, and it isn't for the entire story, but for storylines. So for each storyline, you have 4 beats that you want to hit, and then you weave these storylines together to make like a fuller story. So for every storyline, you have basically an introduction, an exploration, a twist, and a conclusion. Basically, you introduce an idea, you let the characters play with that idea, or the audience see the idea, expand into the space. Then you introduce the twist or the complication or something like that. As the characters get comfortable with the idea and the audience gets uncomfortable with the idea, at that point you're like, haha, but this move. And that twist pulls you into your climax, and that pulls you into your resolution for a storyline. So not for the story as a whole, but if you're talking about a character or a piece of equipment, like a MacGuffin or a city or a scene even. You could do a scene by this as well, like just dial down how strongly you introduce and explore and twist and conclude. So you can just use these 4 beats in any size. You can scale it down, you can scale it up to hit a bunch of storylines. That is a thing I learned as a dungeon master because it really worked well with improvisational goodness. Stories like D&D, because then I just have to remember every time I look at something like a location, an NPC, or a piece of loot or a villain or whatever. What did I do last? Where are we on this 4 scale? Oh, we're still in exploration. Okay, so I reveal a little bit more secrets, or I get them some clues in their hand, or I just give them the freedom to work in a space or talk to an NPC or explore a topic. And then once they get smug, once they start strutting because they understand, at that point you throw in a twist. Now it's good to know the twist is coming so that you can properly set it up at the start so that it makes sense, as so also there's aids for this. So even though you're just now introducing the ruby shape of the ruby heart necklace that protects or shows the way or whatever the fucking magic item will do, you're introducing it just now, you pulled it out of your ass, then you can already think, okay, what is the twist on this thing or whatever. And the first thing would be, oh, it's cursed, but not maybe. Who owns this thing and are they looking for it is a very sensible twist. So people, so people use this magic item and they're going, and they're doing their thing and they're healing themselves and they're having a good old time. And then the guy who owned it gets word of this and comes looking for it. And that's where you...
Yeah, it's a pretty simple solve. You can just say every time they use the necklace, it sends out a beacon, the magic. And you can see and he follows or whatever. I hear you. It doesn't matter. That's pretty cool. Actually, I think what we should do is we should take some award-winning Korean movies. Parasite comes to mind because that sort of follows that structure. It's 4 characters, the opposing families. Each one of them has their own narrative, and it kind of concludes at the end, but not for everyone the same. I think that would be real interesting. Thank you for sharing that, man. Yeah.
No, okay. I just cliff noted, and I wasn't expecting to talk about it, so I didn't do my proper research, but that is how I work with it in my head.
Oh, that makes sense to me, and it is different than the 3-act structure quite a lot. I think we should compare some Oscar winners and see where we come out. That would be cool. For me, I've been playing the Resident Evil games. Still, they're really great. I haven't played 4. I'm playing 2 at the moment. The remakes. Man, just a lot of fun. They prove that your mechanics of a video game doesn't necessarily have to tie into the story, because it's Resident Evil. It's fighting / running away from zombies, but it's also just one gigantic match-it puzzle. You know those puzzles where all the tiles are flipped, and then you have to flip them one at a time, and you have to get 2 peaches, and you have to get 2 pears.
Yeah.
And then it goes away. That's Resident Evil's core gameplay, is that. You find a thing somewhere, and then you use that thing somewhere else to solve a problem, and then that thing will solve another problem, and so on, and so on, and so on, until you get to the end, and then you're just fighting zombies in between. And it's fantastic. I'm having a ball. It's really, really cool. I'm not going to lie. I've got excited for number 3. I have played number 7, which is also great. Love that game. I haven't played Village yet, because I don't want to play it on my crummy ass PS4. I need a PS5. I'll wait and I'll play it on that. My backlog of video games is so large, I'll never run out of something to play. That'll definitely choose.
Oh, okay. Now that's a good problem to have.
It is one of the better problems to have. You're absolutely correct. And on that note, to having first world problems, Merlin, thank you for joining us. I'll see you next week.